We are moving on now to this story here with Richard Wolff and Chris Hedges. So speaking of Russia, Ukraine, that's one of the other things they're going to get into in this discussion, actually right off the bat. And you're going to hear how the duopoly, again, like I told you guys, it's not that much different. They want some of the same things on both sides. They're both pro-war. They're both corporate, right? So that's one of the things that they're going to mention here. They're going to talk about how it's really not that much difference in reference to the duopoly. And this is the topic for the call-in discussion tonight, because I want to get your takes on this as well. How you feel about the duopoly and what could we do to possibly change things in the future? Like, it really scares me that we're inching towards some type of a nuclear catastrophe here. It's a hot mess. But if you do not, I hit the right thing. Oh, that is the right thing. Yes, just want to do a quick like check really quick. I'm trying to pull a CJ, but this is not really meant to be. Trying to do a quick like check really quick. If you haven't had a chance to do so, go ahead and smash that like button. That helps me out with the algo. Thank you so much. And let's go ahead and get into this discussion here.
Appreciate it. You're a seasoned journalist, to say the least. How do you assess the urgent issues that are addressed these days by the likes of the New York Times and the Washington Post? And by urgent issues, I really mean three things: the Ukraine war, the U.S.-China conflict, and the risks these days spoken of a nuclear war.
Well, the New York Times does what it has traditionally done, along with the Washington Post and all of the other mainstream media outlets, and that is serve as a cheerleader for the war industry. That's nothing new. Go back to Iraq, the invasion of Iraq. That is the role that they have always played and continue to play. The coverage out of the Ukraine is quite disturbing. I covered many conflicts. It's very clear that it's tightly controlled by the Ukrainians, so that reporters and camera people are taken out to visit a town that's been recaptured or driven up for a couple hours to the front line and then driven back. It's the old system of minders, the traditional dog and pony shows that really shapes the message or allows the Ukrainians to completely dominate the message in terms of the war. I mean, we have pretty credible reports that there's been reprisals against by the Ukrainians against people who are suspected, accused of being Russian collaborators. I've spent enough time in any war zone to tell you that once the chaos envelops a landscape at war, both sides lie like they breathe, both sides commit atrocities. Sometimes those atrocities are dominated by one side or the other. That was certainly true in the war in Bosnia, but we're not really getting any serious coverage. And when there is an attempt at more nuanced coverage, such as CBS did when they filed an investigative piece that estimated that only 30% of the weapons being shipped into Ukraine. Remember, the United States has now provided $100 billion in aid to this proxy war. That's almost double the size of the budget of the State Department. So, of course, utter insanity. But that there's no accountability for these weapons once they cross the border into Ukraine. And they are, I think, according to the CBS report, which they hastily had to take down, they are ending up in the hands of warlords, black marketeers, and the Azov battalion. Who knows? It's
in Africa. Some of them have ended up in Africa, too. It's crazy, man.
It's not controlled. There's no audit. Even the Pentagon admits there's no oversight. In terms of Taiwan, the Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan, this is a way, of course, to create tensions with China, and that's what keeps the budget, especially for the huge budget handed to the Navy. It's all about creating enemies. I mean, I go back to '89. Gorbachev, I was in Eastern Europe. Gorbachev wanted to build a security and economic alliance with the United States and Europe. But if there was no enemy, if Russia was an enemy, they were going to make it Russia an enemy because there would be no excuse to expand NATO. Indeed, NATO which was designed to prevent Soviet expansion into Eastern and Central Europe, should have been disbanded after the collapse of the Soviet Union and all of the revolutions, which I covered in Eastern Europe. So it's the war industry, unfortunately, drives policy. The two parties are completely captive to it. We just passed this gigantic military bill, $850 billion.
Which both parties approved. Let's pause here for just a second. Which both parties approved of that budget. The Pentagon failed their audit, but yet they're still allowed to send money. Let me make this make sense. They failed their audit, which basically means they can't account for where the money went or where all the money went. But they're still allowed to send more money to Ukraine. That doesn't make any sense. It's irresponsible. It really is. It's irresponsible. And honestly, it's quite embarrassing. And I think it's disgusting. It is absolutely disgusting that we had a defense budget approved for over $800 billion. Over $800 billion. But they don't want to give people health care in this country. Anything that's supposed to go towards the people here, they don't want to do. But $800 billion for the defense budget? Billions and billions of dollars sent for Ukraine? But when it comes to the American people, nada. None. Terrible.
45 billion more than the Biden administration requested. And that if you read traditional accounts of how empires self-destruct, hollow themselves out from the inside, it is unchecked, unregulated, rampant militarism. That's what destroyed the Roman Empire. I mean, by the long list, the Ottomans and everyone else. So we are following that trajectory. And on the issue of war and on the issue of militarism, and of course we've militarized internally our own society as we've destroyed it economically, there's no daylight between the Democrats and the Republicans, with this caveat: there's more opposition to that budget among the Republicans now than there is to the Democrats. AOC, to her credit, voted down this big $1.7 trillion spending bill that included that military budget that I mentioned. She voted against it, and Tlaib voted present. But you had far more opposition among the Republicans. Some of them are nutcases, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, etc. But yeah, the Democratic Party is fervently behind war and controlled by the war industry, and that is utterly disastrous because, of course, it's flirting with two nuclear powers. I mean, I covered wars. I can tell you, you don't control them once they start. They control you. And one mistake, go back and read Barbara Tuchman. I mean, you can stumble into global suicidal conflicts very, very easily. I'm here to, I never thought I'd be in this position, hold up the words of Henry Kissinger, who has warned that there has to be negotiations quickly, that the whole idea of allowing Ukraine to recapture all of Ukrainian territory, including the eastern part of the Donbass, where you have ethnic Russians. Even the New York Times has said this is not a realistic reality or a realistic goal. Just to end, I mean, there's no, like the 20-year debacle in the Middle East, these people have no thought as to where this is going to lead. There's, as far as I can tell, no goal other than degrading Russian military forces and hopefully driving Putin out of office. Of course, that
and weakening Russia economically. Yep,
that didn't work too well in Syria, and Russia's a much bigger country. In fact, the economic sanctions have hurt Europe far more than they've hurt Russia. So yeah, it's just another debacle by the profiteers, the war profiteers, who unfortunately are driving policy, and it's a very dangerous policy to follow.
I agree. And yes, a lot of other Europeans are suffering because of this. I told you guys multiple times about the inflation in the UK, the fact that people there can't afford to pay for a heat and are having to go to facilities called warm banks just so they can have some type of heat and then return back home to a cold apartment or a cold house. It's a problem across the board. We've seen people protesting in France. We've seen them protesting in the UK. It's just, it's gotten to the point where it's just too much. I think the inflation in the UK is at what, 10.4%. That is, it's absolutely insane. So this idea that Biden had of putting sanctions on Russia, it doesn't just hurt Russia, it's actually hurting other European countries as well. That's the kicker.
All right, let me switch the focus a little bit. Donald Trump, it appears, is in a process of some sort of decline as a political force in the country. And there is a governor in Florida who seems to be aiming to replace him. How does all of this strike you?
Well, DeSantis is more dangerous because, unlike Trump, he's competent. Like Pompeo or Tom Cotton or these others. Trump, with or without Trump, it doesn't. We still live mired in this political divide, political morass, with these political distortions because of what the two parties have done to the economy and to the livelihood of working class men and women. I mean, that's what's driving this, largely the white working class that feels dethroned, displaced, which they have been. Incredible accumulation of wealth by this oligarchic elite, which is unlike anything we've seen. Going back, we'd have to go back to, I don't know, Rome or, pharaonic Egypt or something to see this kind of wealth. The Rockefellers had a few billion. Our billionaire class has 180 plus billion. And that's social inequality. You don't have to take even political science 101 to understand that social inequality creates these kinds of messianics, right-wing populists, neo-fascist. That's what is vomited up from a society that no longer functions. It's what I witnessed when I covered the war in Yugoslavia. Go back and look at Weimar Germany. It's the same. So Trump, with or without Trump, the problem isn't going to go away until we address the social inequality, the political stagnation, and the fact that corporate power has seized every institution, including, of course, the media, and deformed them to serve their predatory interests on everybody else. So, and we've got inflation. The Biden administration has been unable to fulfill even its most tepid campaign promises: Build Back Better, the $15 minimum wage, the ability of care to be provided to the working class, et cetera, et cetera. So, in fact, in some ways, it's worse than Trump because the supplemental packages have all evaporated, including, of course, they're lifting the moratorium on foreclosures and bank repossessions. So it's a very fraught and difficult time. 2024, with or without Trump, is still going to be very ugly.
That's the piece I really wanted to hit on. And we can talk, like I said, we'll talk about this on Call In tonight, but that's the piece I really want you to focus on. That 2024, with or without Donald Trump, it's still going to be really ugly. Because economically, we're still we're in 2023 now. 2024 is not far away. Economically, things are still really bad for a lot of people in this country because of the inflation. But even before the inflation, even before the pandemic, economically, people were still struggling in this country. And there were too many Americans living paycheck to paycheck. And you still had the issues of gentrification, which also still exists today or worse today. You still had a homeless issue, which is actually worse today. You still have issues with infrastructure, which is worse today. And you still have issues with public transportation and commuting and all these things that we've talked about before, the healthcare industry. It's all worse today. And I don't know about you, but I don't magically believe that all of these problems are going to be better by 2024. I don't think so. They don't move that fast. It kind of reminds me, it's a funny thing. It kind of reminds me when I was working at MIT and I used to have to take things down to the copy center because we didn't have copiers. It's this whole like eco-friendly thing. Anyway, I had to take things down to the copy center. And I remember like just saying like, okay, I'll come back in about an hour. And they were like, we don't move that fast. But no, it's true. It's not going to change that fast. So what I want you to really focus on is this. This is why I say we can't look towards one person to be a hero. I think we need to focus more of our efforts on something like what Shama Sawant's organization is doing. Workers Strike Back. We need to focus efforts on things like that. Maybe you can join Socialist Alternative as well if that's something you want to do, but you got to have something happening on the outside as well. But a lot of Americans, they're still sitting around looking for a hero. A lot of Americans still believe that there's that one person that just needs to run for president and everything is going to be better. I know because I was one of those people, because I believed that Bernie Sanders was going to be that person. I believed that Bernie Sanders was going to be the one to make it better. And years prior to him, I believed that Obama really meant what he said when he said hope and change. Yes, we can. But then when they get there, they all end up being just like the predecessors before them. Because at the end of the day, it's corporate money that controls the parties. So instead of most of their interest being invested into the American people, most of their interest is invested in their donors and corporations. And then you have entities like BlackRock and Vanguard that own all the corporations. So you see what I'm saying? You really have to go to the tippity top. You have to climb all the way up that mountain and see who's really at the top. And when you climb up that mountain, you'll see it's not Elon Musk at the top. He's rich, but he ain't at the top. It's not Jeff Bezos that's at the top. Again, rich, but not at the top. There is even more concentrated wealth. So if you have companies like BlackRock and a Vanguard, and they are shareholders with the media, and they are shareholders with the banks and other companies, and they're shareholders with big pharma, you just putting in another person as the presidential nominee, that's just one piece of the puzzle. You haven't cracked the rest of the puzzle yet because you still waiting on that one piece. And that's not the piece that's going to solve the puzzle. So this is why I continue to tell you, you can focus on arguing with people over which candidate this, which candidate that. And I continue to bring candidates onto the show. But at the end of the day, I do want you to understand that's just one piece. There are other things that need to be done. This is why I keep saying you need to get a corporate money out of electoral politics. I don't know what happened to Let's End Citizens United. Why don't people talk about that anymore? This used to be a big thing. It's not just about calling out Amazon. It's not just about calling out Walmart and Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. Those are the easy targets, guys. It's not just about calling out CNN for lying to people or Fox News for lying to people. Again, those are the easy targets. You need to look at who owns those entities. Who owns CNN? Who owns Fox News? BlackRock. Who owns these banks that were bailed out during the housing crisis? And why were they bailed out? Again, companies like BlackRock and Vanguard, because they control so much. So until you, I don't know, take apart all of that, we're going to be playing the same game every election cycle. So what you can do right now is get involved with things that are helping people, the workers, helping the workers. So Workers Strike Back, what Shama Sawant announced, I think that's something that you should get involved with. You got to do something. You can't just hope that one person is going to change the game for you.
Do you think it will include the white supremacy dimension of all of this?
Yeah, that's key, because what happened, this is what happened in Yugoslavia, the economic collapse of Yugoslavia. You strip people of their sense of place and dignity and work within the society, then they reach out, often for a fictional identity. In the case of Yugoslavia, that was Serbian ethnic nationalism or Croatian. I mean, they resurrected the Ustasha and all the old symbols and everything else. In this case, it is the idealized golden age of white supremacy, neo-Confederacy, that has attracted the white working class and created this vast divide where how many people voted for Trump? Was it 74 million or something? I mean, it's a lot of people. And like Yugoslavia, once people fall into that fantasy world, which it really is, there's no communication because with the other side, they're both grounded now in separate realities, or even in, I would argue, in non-reality based belief systems. The Democrats are guilty of this with Russiagate, as if Russia was responsible for electing Trump. You'd have to pluck your eyes out or something to believe that. So that it's a very precarious moment. It's very fragile. It's very dangerous, and we can't ignore the fact that the country's awash in weapons, not just weapons, but automatic weapons. I grew up in Maine. My relatives are all hunters. You don't carry AR-15s into the woods. They're useless for shooting down a deer. The caliber of the bullet is too small. So unless I guess you want to pepper the deer with 10 or 15 bullets or something. These are weapons. They're assault weapons, and that the school shootings are what they're averaging more than one a day. A school or mass shootings are averaging more than. Well, this is a society that's deeply, deeply disturbed, and unfortunately, the Biden administration, other than funding, pumping these massive resources into Ukraine or the military, is not responding. There's this political stagnation is extremely dangerous, coupled with the fact that because we have an uncontrollable militarism romping around the globe, talking about defending Taiwan and bringing down Putin, it's a really, really dangerous time.
Well said. Well said. I just want to do a quick thing really quick. I want to show you, and I know you guys have, or some of you have seen this before. What happened to the teachers? All right, I have to go back to that. But some of you have seen this before, but I want to show you again, because when I talk about the spending, like I want you to see what it looks like on a graph. So let's do that bad boy. I want to show you what it looks like on a graph. We're going to talk about spending, U.S. military spending, defense budget from 1960 to 2023. Maybe I need to zoom out just a little bit. Just look at the graph, guys. Like, I don't really have to say too much here, right? I don't have to say too much. Here are the years. Here's 1960, okay? 47.35 billion. And as you can see, the years are at the bottom here. You can see as we go across, look at how it just goes up. Over 200 billion, 1990, over 325 billion. You'll see it go down a little bit too, right? Then we get over to 2000, right here, 320 billion. And then it creeps up here, 03. This is when we're going into, I think this is when I have to make this smaller. I'm sorry, guys. It's cutting things off. All right. 2003. All right. So it makes sense that it's going up here because we were at some type of conflict, right? Isn't this when we were going into Iraq, 2003? So it makes sense that it would increase at that point in time. But remember, we pulled out in 2011. So if we pulled out in 2011, why the hell going to 2013? Why is it still at over $679 billion? This is absolutely ridiculous. And then it dips down again, still in the 600. Do you see the big change, you guys? And now here we are in 2023. And now they need to update this because it doesn't scroll all the way to 2023. But now it's actually over 800 billion. But do you see the increase over time? You go from 40 billion to, just look at this. Look at this, guys. Come on. That's right, Mike. That's a good one. Afghanistan. There you go. Do you see it? It just, what? More people. I want more people to call this out. I really do. I want more people. Show people this graph. Show people this graph.